To start introducing the speaker, I have to say a couple of things. First is thank you for coming. Then, if any one of you want to order some food, we will do everything after the talk. So then we can have dinner together with Paco, because hey, we don't want to start having dinner and he's going to be speaking. Next, I have to say that we just signed an agreement with Jamón. So Jamón agrees to offer a 20% discount not only in the SRUK events but also to all the members. Every time you want to come here to Jamón Soho, you will receive the 20% discount in your bill. So just from here say thank you to Jamón. Then I'm going to introduce the speaker. Most of you already know him. He's Dr. Francisco González Redondo, or Paco. He's our best friend, founding member of SRUK, because he was here in the assembly, the General Assembly where we founded the society. He was the first speaker opening the very beginnings of the society, when we were not yet an official society. We were a group of friends trying to build a society, and he was here. He was one of these friends giving us the lecture about Leonardo Torres Quevedo in the embassy. Then he came back and he gave the first talk in Cambridge. The one was the beginning of the Cambridge constituency. Again, he came back last year to be the first speaker of our first cycle of seminars, 2013, sponsored by the embassy, the Office for Cultural and Scientific Affairs. And this year, he's coming again to give us a science in the pub and going to Sheffield on Saturday to help the constituency of Midlands to be officially created. So I have to thank from deep inside Paco to be here, because he loves the society and he's more than a member, he's more than a speaker. He's also doctor twice. He's doctor in maths and doctor in philosophy. Sorry, I have all these things written and I haven't got time to read it. So anyway. And he's written a lot of books, articles about the history of science. And his degree is you are a mathematician, but then you decided to move to history of science because experience in life. And now he's one of the most recognized lecturers in history of science. So I'm not going to speak more because I speak a lot. And thank you, Paco, and thanks for coming.
Good evening. After this presentation, you must be terrified. Now the speaker is going to suffer a sudden attack of modesty, of false modesty. And he's going to spend 10 minutes contradicting Eduardo just to keep talking about himself. And you know the worst thing about this? That you're right. I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to spend 10 minutes talking about myself. But it's not because of vanity. It's because of the issues we are going to deal with. And why? Because we are going to talk about something that in Spain is called memoria histórica, which in English wouldn't be translated exactly as historical memory. That would be something close. Civil war, purge, exile. I've introduced again the word reconciliation, which is something I think new. And why do I have to talk about myself? Because I must recall my memories. And Eduardo would ask, your memories? Oh, come on, you are not even 50. Well, yes, but I'm getting closer. And it's compulsory talking about your memories. Because Franco died in 1975, democracy was reinstated, and we had an amnesty law of amnesty. All, as You can see all acts of political intention, whatever its outcome, were forgiven. And we could start reconciliation. Francisco Giral, the son of José Giral, former prime minister and president of the Republic in exile, wrote this in 1994. Once I recovered my position in the ranks of Spanish University in 1975, I was assigned to the University of Salamanca. Several months before, Augusto Pérez Vitoria had also requested his reinstatement as professor at the University of Murcia. We were the only two exiled professors that could join again Spanish University before reaching the statutory retirement age. Most exiled professors had died already or exceeded the retirement age. While in Salamanca, one day I received a call from Francisco González de Posada in Santander, my father and master. With the support from Amigos de la Cultura Científica, Friends of Scientific Culture, I was invited on several occasions to lecture on Spanish science in exile, something he did between 1980. I took that photo, I was a child, that was my father and those two, Francisco Giral and Augusto Pérez Vitoria, and in fact I got in contact as early as 1982 with this world of exile of our scientists. In a few years later, Franco's statue was moved for several months because in Santander they were going to build an underground parking. And my father suggested, the mayor, why don't you keep the statue in military barracks and instead of the statue of Franco, why don't you put Leonardo Torres Quevedo's statue? And if you don't know how to do it, it's very easy. I contract a sculpture, I get the money for the sculpture, and I give as a present to the city of Santander the sculpture of Leonardo Torres Quevedo. Instead of that, the mayor sent people against us, and we would get phone calls at 4 o'clock in the morning saying things like, with 2 big balls and a pistol, we're going to kill you fucking Reds, etc. Well, you know that kind. Well, we were not Reds, not blue, but we just wanted science and peace and reconciliation. And scientists instead of Franco will be much better for a town like Santander. No, the statue is somewhere else. By lucky chance, a pupil of mine, who is now the mayor of Santander, a pupil of mine playing basketball, he was one of my players, and now he's the mayor of Santander, removed in 2006, 20 years later. I don't know why they had to wait 20 years to do so, removed finally the statue. In 1988, when I finished my career, my first task was publishing the first chapter of Francisco Giral's book on exile. And in 1990, Augusto Pérez Vitoria was ill, and he gave me the legacy of Enrique Moles, one of our exiled scientists. So I had to take care of it, improve it, and exhibit it. With 2 exhibitions I curated in 1997 and 2005 in somewhere else, but just as a sum. But my father wanted me to have a broad picture of what happened in the past. And he got in contact with the family of Julio Palacios. And who was Julio Palacios? Well, we have him with King Juan Carlos' father, Don Juan, because he was a member of his private council. And he was a 5th columnist during the war. And he was the teacher of King Juan Carlos, the one who organized the teachings of our king. Well, again, that was in 1982. In 1991, I had to take care of all this legacy, all those documents, and organize several exhibitions about this man. So I'm going to summarize 2 completely different sides, Franco's and exile. In order to improve the picture, we also inherited the legacy, this is not as big as the former ones, of Blas Cabrera, leading Spanish physicist who went into exile, first to France, then to Mexico, with, he is here, in Mexico, with Ignacio Bolivar. And again, I curated an exhibition, I organized a congress, and we published several books, his complete works. In 1996, it was the centenary of Arturo Dupérier, who came here to exile in England, first Manchester and then London. And the family wanted us to write a book, organize an exhibition, so they gave us also the legacy, copies. The other ones were originals, these were just copies we keep. And we organized exhibitions, and we published this book. The author says I'm co-author. Well, I helped them doing that. That's the house where he lived here in Notting Hill Gate. My younger brother, who is a chemist, wanted to do a PhD. And the family of Ángel del Campo, the chemist who introduced spectroscopy in Spain, gave us the legacy. Well, he went into private companies, so I had to take care of the legacy again and organize exhibitions in the Museum of Science in Castilla-La Mancha or in the Casa de las Ciencias in Logroño. But physics and chemistry is not enough. So the Royal Academy of History, you know, that has published a dictionary of biographies with a very interesting biography of Franco. And also, there are some other biographies not as complicated as that. For example, the biography of Pineda, and they asked me to write it. And if you want to write 2 pages, you need to write first 30. So I got in contact with the family, and they gave me the legacy of a man who lived in Madrid during the war, who was moved to Valencia in order to, well, with the government, as they moved when Franco's troops were close in Madrid, surrounding Madrid. So I have here, and I'm going to show you part of his legacy, because it's also very much interesting. But there are articles, you Google a little bit and you find things. So I had to recall my memories in order to justify where we are here and why SRUK has invited me. If you Google, you will find many articles on this issue. All right, that's the first part. That's memories. But you're not here for memories, you're here for history. You want me to construct history, not recall my memories. So I want to ask you several questions. Have you all read the summary of what we are dealing with?
Yes.
Is there anyone here expecting miracles from me? No. I ain't no miracle worker. All right. No. Do you know there's a difference between up and down, between left and right, between good and bad, between here and there? But do you know that difference where it's explained? It is explained in Sesame Street. We are not in Sesame Street. This is almost Charing Cross, and we are not children. We are adults. So life is much more complicated than we would like to live in. So you should not expect one and the same talk will satisfy each individual's radically different expectancies, listening exactly what each person would like to hear and watching each one's preconceived pictures. All right, we must all realize that the speaker delivers lectures while he is not able to perform miracles. I'm going to try to do my best, but no, don't wait for miracles. Right. Rapid smile from your faces. We are getting into tragedies. Because between the 17th and 18th of July 1936, a military plot ended up in a SRUK. Spain was broken, families were broken, brothers, sisters. And by November, Franco signed the following provision. The fact that for several decades, academia, in all its stages and with increasingly rare exceptions, have been influenced and almost monopolized by dissolving ideologies and institutions in open opposition to the national wit and tradition, makes it necessary that in these solemn moments we are experiencing a complete and thorough revision on the personnel of public instruction should be undertaken. A formality must be prior to a radical and definitive reorganization of all teachings, removing from its roots through this process those false doctrines that, together with its apostles, have been the main factors for the tragic situation the nation has been led to. Well, Franco did not write this. Of course, he could not. This is a summary of ideas we can find in books like this. We're taking, without context, quotes from El Socialista or words from the Minister of Education, Fernando de los Ríos, put on target scientists and professors in order to focus on them, purge, and bringing them into exile. To the Red Revolution, socialism gave the masses, while the Institución Libre de Enseñanza provided the leaders, as they quote. And they say in this book, a great truth printed by El Socialista during those boastful days of the Republican victory in 1931. Truth proclaimed by the same conspicuous institutions. Thus the euphoria of power sparkled the otherwise cautious tongue of Fernando de los Ríos to write. And to write where purge should focus on. We have the target, the name of the beast, the Free Institution for Teaching, the Board for Advanced Studies. So what's tradition? What's national wit in the view of these people in charge of purge? This is tradition, this is honor, this is the golden age of Spain, the 16th century. King Charles V and Philip II where we were the owners of the world. It's true. All the Pacific coast belonged to Spain. It was called Spanish Lake. Spain was the owner of the world because we joined both crowns, Spain and Portugal. Every boat, every ship was under control of Spain. But again, the Golden Age was the age of the Counter-Reformation, the Council of Trent and Counter-Reformation. The Golden Age was the age of painters and the age of writers. But from our point of view, it was the age of two books, the Bible and the Index of forbidden books, forbidden by the Inquisition. Those were the two books where everything was based upon. So we could not enjoy, we were absent from scientific revolution. We could not teach Copernicus in Spain. The earth was in the center of the universe and we could not contradict that truth. Of course, we could not read Galileo, and of course, don't even attempt to read Newton. It was forbidden. It was not in the Bible, it was not in the Index. So, as late as the late 18th century, our most outstanding figure in mathematics and physics would write, would it be decent to force our nation to, after explaining the Newtonian systems and philosophy, add to each phenomenon depending upon the movement of the earth, but do not think the movement is against the sacred writings? Would it not be to outrage then the sacred writings, the Bible, to pretend the Bible opposes the most delicate demonstrations from geometry and mechanics? Could any wise Catholic understand this without becoming scandalized? Will our nation stop being the intellectual laughingstock of Europe? As late as the 18th century. But if the planets are here or there, if the Earth or the Sun is in the center of the universe, it's not a big problem, not even for the Inquisition. Once we read Darwin's The Origin of Species. If we read literally the Bible, and if we read literally The Origin of Species, we find a big problem Europe had to face in 1959 and onwards. If our species comes from a previous species, Adam and Eve had not existed. If Adam and Eve have not existed, they have not committed the original sin. If they have not committed the original sin, there is no need at all for God the Father to send His Son to die on the cross to redeem us from a sin we have not committed. I insist, literal reading of the Bible and a literal reading of Darwin's The Origin of Species. The figure of Christ is unnecessary. That was the reading in 1959. Big problem. And a big problem for those who wanted to teach Darwin's Origin of Species in Spain. Everywhere, in particular in Spain. And those trying to do that were dismissed from the professorships. And they tried to create a free institution for teaching, the Institución Libre de Enseñanza. Well, they were reinstated in their chairs, so the thing only ended up as a private school for primary and secondary students. But their spirit remained. The spirit of improvement, spirit of fighting against, let's call it superstition, let's call it religion. Each one chooses its own name for it. But the fact is that Spain was in decline. We were falling down. We were losing our empire until 1898, when we lost against the United States of America, Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, the Marianas Islands, etc. We were deep at the bottom. We were in disaster. We signed an agreement and we lost our empire. Well, that's good, because if you reach the bottom, you can raise. And you yes. And the problem in the 21st century is that we have not learned from what happened in the 20th century. Liberals lost the war. If it was conservatives, they would have lost it anyway. But it was conservatives who had to raise up Spain. And what was the first thing the conservative government did in 1900? They created the Ministry of Education, which did not exist. And they reformed the whole education in Spain because conservatives understood that the only way of regenerating Spain was through education, through science, through investment, public investment in education and research. Exactly like in the 21st century. What did this government do when Santiago Ramón and Cajal got the Moscow Prize? From the Ministry of Home Affairs, takes care of the police, etc., not from education, no. They created a laboratory of biological research because conservatives from everywhere were in the task of reinstating the glory of education in Spain. Brand Spain. In 1903, it was published in the Gaceta in 1904, January 1904, then, well, in this case it was the Ministry of Public Works, Agriculture and Public Works, created a laboratory, a center for aeronautical research to make it possible for Leonardo Torres Quevedo to create the remote control, airships, etc. Brand Spain. 1907, liberals created the Junta para Ampliación de Estudios. And what did it mean, the Junta para Ampliación de Estudios? Well, they created two big centers. One, the Center for Historical Studies. And what did they have to do in that center? Well, something very easy. Answer to one question you can try to answer. What is Spain? What is Spain? And try to find an answer, a quick answer. They understood that the answer was not easy. The question was very easy to state. But what about the answer? And they understood that if they wanted to answer that, they should create a department of archaeology, to study Spain from archaeology, another from history of art, because you have to understand Spain from the history of art, from the historical methodology, from its language, or its languages. Spain has several languages, from philosophy, from literature, from late history, medieval, from Arab or Jewish culture. If you have to understand what is Spain, you need all that and many, many, many years. And you can choose. You can try to find, in order to answer that question, what makes us similar. Or you can try to find what makes us different. Because you can do anything. And that's what Americo Castro, as an example, and Sánchez Albornoz did. Americo Castro said, we are the reunion of Christian tradition, Jewish tradition, Arab tradition, Greek tradition, Roman tradition, etc. All merged in a common nature. And he said, bullshit. If we must define Spain, we have to define Spain trying to find what is not Spain. For example, Africa. Spain is Christianism. So what is not Spain? Muslim. Arab countries. Spain is trying to find what gathers us together or what separate us. That's only in the 20th century. No, in the 21st century, isn't it? In the 21st century, we are all trying to find what makes us similar. Or not. But apart from trying to find what is Spain, we also had to go and meet science in Europe. And that was made mainly through the Instituto Nacional of Physical and Natural Sciences, with Cajal as president and Blas Cabrera as secretary. And here, it was not department, it was centers. The Museum of Natural Sciences, Cajal's laboratory, the Museum of Anthropology, the Botanical Garden, Mathematical Laboratory, biological research, the Laboratory of Physical and Chemical Research, etc., etc., etc. Departments that could send students with scholarships, pensions were called, in order for young graduates and postgraduates to meet real science. In Leiden, Leipzig, Munich, Paris, Leipzig again, or London. Through pensions enjoyed here in the United Kingdom, for example, by Rodriguez Lafora, or Lorenzo, look here, the Cancer Institute, Pío del Río Ortega, or Catalan, Miguel Catalan at Imperial College area. You remember him? Where he discovered the multiplets. Or later on, Severo Ochoa or Francisco Grande Cobian, as examples of the mission of the Junta para Ampliación de Estudios in the United Kingdom, which was not the usual place to come. And what did they do? Converge with Europe. Start to meet international science and publish in English, in French, or in German, normally, without problems, joining international science. For example, Blas Cabrera becoming one of the 9 members of the Conseil Solvay. Madame Curie was very ill by that time, and she had no hair because of her cancer, so she didn't want to appear in the photograph. But we have Einstein and leading Nobel Prizes with our Blas Cabrera as one of the 9 leading physicists of the world in 1930. Yes, but politically, what happened in Spain in 1931? Well, after local elections, Republican parties won the local elections, mayors, etc., and the king understood that he had no support, and he decided to leave Spain. Without war, without revolution, without blood, peacefully, Spain changed from monarchy to republic. Surprising for Spanish history. Previous and later Spanish history. Peaceful. All right, but we had a republic without republicans because we were in the 1930s, and Europe is divided between fascist, Italy, Germany later on, communist, and let's call it democracy. And in Spain there was no tradition of republican thinking. So we had small republican parties, big parties to the right who didn't want the republic, wanted monarchy, landowners, etc., and big party, socialist party to the left, a socialist party which had nothing to do with what we call socialist party now. In the 30s, a socialist party or a communist party wanted a socialist government or a communist government. Private property was not granted for a socialist or a communist government, of course. We must not think and we must not analyze the same words in different moments. So, the Socialist Party never entered the government as a party, only personally led 3 or 4 ministers to join, but not as a party, because for them, we must all understand that in the 1930s, the Republican was only a stage towards a Republican government, a socialist government. Not exactly the same as in Russia, but as close as possible. Distributing the land, distributing the wealth. No landowners, no big companies, and the church not governing everywhere. So we had a republic that had not many republicans, but we had a very proud feeling towards intellectuality, science. For example, opening the most important laboratory of physics and chemistry in Europe, donated by the Rockefeller Foundation. For example, welcoming the International Congress of Pure and Applied Chemistry, the first international congress where Germans, Russians, and Americans would meet together after the First World War. Americans didn't want to meet Germans, Americans didn't want to meet Russians. For the first time in Spain, the whole scientific world would meet, organized by Ángel del Campo, Obdulio Fernández, and mainly, he's not there, Enrique Morrison. Yes, we were almost European. Almost. And again, another civil war, like along the 19th century, like in the 18th century, the 17th century, but this was a more bloody war. We had a war. And what happened to these intellectuals living in the Republican government once the war started? Well, if the war started on the 18th of July, between the 17th and the 18th, by the 19th of July, the anarchists proclaimed the anarchist revolution. And they commemorated the 70th anniversary of the 19th of July, the libertarian revolution. The Communist Party did the same. A communist revolution inside the Republican government, inside the Civil War. And a communist would tell us perfectly what happened on the 19th of July. The real situation that anyone could see just opening their eyes was that the Second Republic had come to an end. The military uprising, paradoxically, had triggered the revolution that sought to prevent. And effective power was in the hands of armed groups of anarchists, socialists, and communists, although a formal government was preserved as a symbol of Republican legality before international opinion. So what did that local government, who was not the Republican government, who was not really in power? Well, they had the Gaceta, the official Gaceta. So they tried to put order. Doing what? All public servants involved in the plot were dismissed, of course. But in order to undertake the reorganization, started a purge of directorships, lectorships, which were declared vacant, in order to know who was with the military involved in the plot or who were loyal to the Republican government. And by September, in order to accomplish the desired purge of all teaching staff, all teachers were dismissed. And they needed to apply for reintroduction in their chairs. Along September, the new state, the nation imposes a complete revision and purge of all servants. So many scientists decided to leave Spain. They had compromised with the Republic in peace, but they didn't want to compromise with the madness of the war. They wanted to research, to teach. They didn't want to go into the trenches and kill each other, to kill brothers and sisters. For example, Severo Ochoa, as early as September 1936, or Blas Cabrera, October 1936, who left Spain, revolutionary Spain, mainly revolutionary Madrid. And they, as a first stop, went to France, like Teófilo Hernando and many others. And then, depended, wherever they were admitted. For example, some of them came here. But not all of them left the Republican side of Spain leaving the government. Some of them left it protected by the government, with grants, with scholarships, like Fernando Calvet, who went to Edinburgh with a grant from the Society for the Protection of Learning, or Pío del Río Ortega with a grant, a scholarship from the Junta para Ampliación de Estudios. The government tried to help some of our scientists because they could not teach research in Spain, and they were supported by the same government to leave. Not all of them. But some of them assumed and helped the Republican legitimacy. For example, the person I called, the mathematician Pedro Pineda, who applied for readmission at the university and applied for readmission at the mathematical laboratory. Or Ángel del Campo, who stayed in Madrid and synthesized nicotinic acid against the pellagra. which was a plague in Madrid. So he got and he cured that plague that was killing many children in Madrid, besieged Madrid. Nicotinic acid, vitamin A, I think it is. Or Enrique Moles, because the Republican government was involved in research, supporting research even during the war. For example, supporting with big budget physical and chemical research at the Institute Rockefeller, or giving money for publishing during the war the Journal of the Society of Chemistry and Physics, like this. And what surprises more, supporting mathematical research during the war. If you support chemical or physical research, well, it's understandable. It might be used in war effort. But mathematics, what use can we make of mathematics during the war? The Republican government supported mathematics during the war. As giving back what the Republic was giving them, some intellectuals helped and joined the task of showing to the world the efforts of the Republican government during the war. And the Republican government left Madrid towards Valencia, which became the capital of the Republican government during the war, in November 1936, trying to save, for example, the paintings of the Prado Museum that were moved from Madrid to, well, they ended up, it's a story for a movie, like the one we have with George Clooney.
Los chicos de las pinturas.
That's it. And these intellectuals that left Madrid, joining the expedition with the government, gathered at the Casa de la Cultura. And from the Casa de la Cultura, they published a journal called Madrid with summaries of their research even during the war, in order to tell the world that they were making research in Spain in those days. Or publishing manifestos like this against fascism, publishing the compromise of several scientists like Dupelier, Moles, Marina Beitia, etc. And those manifestos were sent to Europe, to all scientists in Europe, to find support for the Republican government. But not all of them did that. As I advanced before, Julio Palacios, a physicist, was working at the back of the Republican side, service for Franco, as fifth columnist. We have everything in this world. And some scientists who were Republicans for the Republic in peace, once the war started, decided to move to the national side. And as soon as the Franco's government organized a congress, a scientific congress, he ran with his presentation to help the national side, to show that the national side was making science during the war also. So we have everything. As the war went on, the north provinces of Spain, País Vasco, Cantabria, and Asturias, reduced until it was lost for the Republic. Prisoners, exile. From the other side, it was liberated. The north was liberated for national Spain, for Franco's Spain. The two sides of the same story. And the Republican government had to reorganize the new Spain, which was limited to central and eastern areas, not the north anymore. So they needed to know who was back in the Republican side, or who were in exile, or who had joined national areas. So, again, another year, almost a year of purge inside the Republican government. And all were called to meet in Valencia. They were ordered to meet in Valencia before the 15th of September because the Republican government wanted universities gathered around Valencia to start again as if nothing was happening during the war, with students getting lessons and most degrees operating during the war. Instead of sending students to the trenches, students at home, in the classes, in the classroom. Well, but not everyone attended the call, of course. Most of our scientists and professors were not in Spain by that time. When the Republican government decided to retake again all academic activities at loyal universities, all university professors located in loyal Spain or abroad should have presented themselves before the General Secretary of the University of Valencia before the 15th of September. Opposite to the general attitude shown by the majority of our teachers, a group of professors showing an evident lack of solidarity with the people of Spain who are fighting defending national freedom have not attended the call from the government. So this ministry has decided to dismiss from their chairs, subject to the provision, etc., Zubiri, Américo Claustro, Claudio Sánchez Albornoz, Ortega y Gasset, Blas Cabrera Felipe, etc., etc., etc. The third, Spain, was dismissed from their positions. But many others still remain loyal to the government, now the Prime Minister Juan Negrín. Some others were helped by the government to leave Spain with scholarships, like Arturo Duperrier, who was friend to Minister Julio Álvarez del Valle, and who got permission, signed by Julio Álvarez del Valle, to leave Spain towards France. You can run, but you can't hide. So, Arturo Duperrier arrived here. We have here the passport with the date of entry in the United Kingdom. And many others, as the war was coming to an end, came here, went everywhere, mainly to France, but some of them, like Trueta or Horda, came here to England. Some got help and scholarships from the Society for the Protection of Learning, like Moles or García Banús, who even didn't stay in France or England and went to Colombia. But the purge was about to begin. So far we have been talking about the reorganization and Republican purge. We had to talk about it. But purge was going to start seriously now. The starting point was remarked a few minutes ago. The fact of the main factors for the tragic situation. And what did Franco's purge consist of? What did it consist of? Well, the purge was undertaken along the war, but mainly once Barcelona and afterwards Catalonia fell in the hands of the National Party. And as soon as they knew the war was coming to an end, they started the dismission of many professors. But what could be thought as a victory for Franco was the start of his defeat. The moral suicide, I call it, of Francoism. Because in those orders dismissing professors, they were right. This public and notorious the disaffection towards, sorry for the mistake, the new regime introduced in Spain of those university professors mentioned above. Not only for their performances in the areas that have suffered and those that still suffer their Marxist domination, Valencia was still Republican, but also for their persistent anti-national and anti-Spanish policy during the years preceding the glorious national movement. The evidence of their harmful behavior for the country makes it totally useless to obey those procedural safeguards which all would otherwise constitute the fundamental condition of any persecution. They were not even going to obey their own laws, stipulations, provisions. And what did they do afterwards? They published the law for political responsibilities. What was that law about? This is Arturo Duperrier suffering the actions after this law. The jury would send an inspector and fine his goods. A house worth 60,000 pesetas, his car 20,000 pesetas, he has a bank account. Well, we collect everything, furniture, goods, everything. We make the sum. It makes 120,000 pesetas. You go on trial, and the jury, what would the jury say? We impose a penalty of 124,000 pesetas. So Franco would take everything. Franco's government would take everything through this law of political responsibilities. As if this wasn't enough, they published a big law in order to purge all public servants, which they were not going to obey in any case, but which made different types of punishment for professors. Those were almost forgiven, and those were definitive dismission and withdrawal from the ranks without right to administrative appeal, former minister, definitive dismission and withdrawal from the ranks before official purge, definitive dismission and withdrawal from the ranks after purge, etc., etc., etc. So, we find in this process, if we go to the archives, incredible documents, which we must take very, very, very carefully. For example, I found this. It was not handwritten. It was a typewriter machine. I have broken the name of the person. You cannot see his or her name, because we find a problem. If we keep on searching, we find another person signing something exactly identical, equal to what the first one has signed. And if we find in another file what has been signed by a third, a fourth, a fifth university professor or whatever, we find that there is someone writing and the professor only signs. In which circumstances those documents have been signed? With a gun here? With your wife, your daughter being sexually attacked or abused? No one knows. So we must be very, very careful with what we see in those documents. But the fact is that all those documents mean something. If I'm not still professor, and I accuse those who are on top of me in the ranks, and they are condemned, I find the right way, the fast way to improve my career. So all we can read here is someone moving and removing in their way up to the professorship. At the same time, we find personal integrity. Dignity amid madness. Because some teachers, some professors didn't want to get involved in that. But we find exile. Many people who could not stand what was going to happen and decided, forced by circumstances, to leave Spain. First to France, and when German troops conquered France in the Second World War, mainly to Britain, to the United States, and above all, Mexico, where President Lázaro Cárdenas welcomed an elite of scientists, intellectuals, exiled intellectuals from Spain, Ignacio Bolívar, Camilo Bolívar, etc. Some scientists who stayed in France, like Enrique Moles, attended the appeal of Franco's government. At this critical moment for Europe, Second World War, Spain calls for her children living in France, free or in concentration camps, and invites them to return to their homeland. Our nation, ruled by the caudillo Franco, is open to all Spanish on whose conscience there is no crime. No one believes anymore in the legend of Spanish repression. Everyone knows how Franco has administered justice. All Spanish bearing a clean conscience and an honest past have in this one great and free Spain a place to work in the effort to make it better and cure its ills. And some attended the appeal, like Enrique Moles, just to be condemned as he crossed the border. We must condemn, and we do condemn, the accused citizen Enrique Moles Ormella as an offender for having joined the military rebellion. No, the rebellion was the other side. To life imprisonment, which will be materialized in complete seclusion for 30 years. The Supreme Council of Military Justice. Some went into exile, and although Blas Cabrera had left the Republican side as early as October 1936, he was welcomed by exiled Republicans in Mexico. We have him here with another exiled scientist at the late 1941 until he died in 1945. some scientists decided to stay in Spain, and they had to suffer a different type of exile, like Barinaga, mathematician or physicist Catalan. Barinaga had stayed in Republican Spain, but Catalan had joined national Spain and had even going to the first scientific meeting. No solution for them. They were dismissed from their professorships, and they had to suffer internal exile. But even Julio Palacios, the fifth columnist, was not really fascist. He was monarchist. And in 1944, as the Second World War was coming to an end, and Don Juan said, I can be the king of Spain, democracies of the world, you're about to defeat the Nazi Germans. Why don't you put me as the king of Spain and remove Franco, who was an ally to Mussolini and Hitler? Democracies didn't want that, and Franco continued. But some professors, like Julio Palacios, joined the appeal from Don Juan and was confined in Almansa, Albacete, in 1944, and he had to go into exile to Portugal later. Well, between exile and reconciliation. In 1945, with the defeat of Hitler, those suffering internal exile started to be forgiven. Franco was afraid of the United States, of France, United Kingdom. He had been kin to Hitler, and Hitler had been defeated. What was going to happen to Spain? We had bunkers all along our coast, waiting for the American fleet to come and conquer Spain after defeating Hitler. That didn't happen, because Franco was clever enough to show himself as the leader of the fight against communist Russia. He was very clever. So Don Juan didn't get the crown, and democracy didn't go back to Spain. For example, Palacios had to move to Lisbon, and he played a great role. He could come back to Spain whenever he wanted, but the government didn't want him. He lost the directorship of the laboratory, he lost the vice rectorate at Madrid's university, but he was tolerated, and he played a key role as the connection between exiled scientists and internal Spain for several decades. Inside Spain, this mathematician, not a good-looking one, but a very good, he started an interesting, if you have to do a PhD in contemporary history, that would be a very interesting thing to study, the mutuality of professors. And why? Yes, many professors have been paying their taxes in Spain before the war. So they had rights. Once they retired, after reaching 70 years old, they had rights. Maybe they could not come to Spain without suffering trials, but they had money waiting for them. And that was his task. Annoying the government, of course. The government didn't like it. But he defended from inside Spain the rights of those exiled scientists. So as soon as they retired, he had to send them the money. The mutuality of professors. Very interesting institution. At the same time, with the defeat of Hitler, many scientists, many professors appealed the sentence from the Court of Political Responsibilities, trying to recover their goods. Like, for example, Arturo Duperrier request for dismissal in March 1947. And the government wanted to do different things. For example, ABC publishing Spanish genius in London, Arturo Duperrier here, who was in exile. And by 1947, he got the dismissal of the responsibilities. Even from the Consejo Superior de Investigaciones Científicas, for example, they were calling for exiled scientists. In this case, calling for Arturo Duperrier to come and deliver lectures, because he was about to become Nobel Prize for Physics here if he had renounced to the nationality, Spanish nationality. He didn't do that. He wanted to come back to Spain. And they were using that, inviting those who wanted to come, although they had problems with the justice. And things changed a lot in the 50s. Franco sent Ruiz Jiménez, who was a Democrat and Christian, and Pedro Laín to sign an agreement with the Vatican Franco wanted to elect himself bishops and cardinals, etc. And the Vatican didn't want that, of course. So they had to sign an agreement which is still functioning, working, and is why we have religion in schools, etc. Because of this. The agreement signed in the 50s. So Arturo Duperrier, in order to talk as an example of the exiled scientist, the most important exiled scientist in the United Kingdom, moved to Spain in 1952 privately. And by 1953, he was readmitted in his chair. Not bad. So, were we moving towards reconciliation in Spain? Former communist Tagüeña wrote to Palacios in 1956. I got your letter on time, professor and master. I appreciate your words very much. You bring me great joy as you increase any hopes in rejoining spiritually our country. Your understanding attitude confirmed my suspicion that it is in Spain where more human values have been preserved, and I am full of desire to labor for the Spanish to keep together so they will never repeat the tragedies of our generation. He came to Spain. He came to Spain in 1961, but just for a while, and he went back to Mexico where he died. But inside Spain we find these mathematicians, the ugly mathematician I just showed you, fighting from inside for democracy. In 1965, students, mainly in Madrid, were fighting against the government. And some professors, like Aranguren or Tierno Galván, were dismissed from their chairs for supporting these students fighting for freedom. And this man, retired, wrote to the minister, Dear Minister, although retired from teaching due to my age, I take care of everything related to our university. My conscience does not want me to be guilty of an apparent indifference before the sanctions imposed to our fellow professors. I join the demands of freedom, and I would add that it should be done sooner rather than later. As an old man now, I'm historical, and I have no doubt that these professors will be reinstated in their chairs, so I would like to hear that it has been you who has done it. The man writing to the Minister of Education in these terms, because this was happening from inside Spain. At the last stages of Francoism, by 1970, many scientists wanted to return. For example, Blas Cabrera's son, Nicolás Cabrera, who was in exile since 1936, and who got the Grand Coup from Alfonso X el Sabio. Or Severo Ochoa, who had got the Nobel Prize as American, not as Spanish, and for him it was created close to the Universidad Autónoma, the Centro de Biología Molecular. Final remarks. Sorry. Reconciliation in Spain? Don't look at me. Just look at this. Don't look at me. Don't look at me. Okay, Franco died on the 20th of November 1975. We've seen how Franco committed suicide and Francoists committed suicide. The final defeat of Franco was about to come. Many, not many, some people seeked reconciliation. My father used to gather right-wing, left-wing, no wings, Rockefellerians, for example, on the occasion of Enrique Mode's centenary. I joined the task in 1988 because we could read things like this, written by Arturo Duperrier in 1939. I have faith in Spain's destiny after the immense sacrifice to which God has submitted it. I have faith in that once the dreadful lesson we all have suffered has finished, Spain will know how to get rid of all selfishness, meanness, injustice, and immorality that undermine our existence, bringing our nation from postponement, wrapped in that ignorance from which evil men did not know how to liberate us. Tagüeña, I will repeat, I am full of desire to labor for the Spanish to keep together so they will never repeat the tragedies of our generation. So, against the tragedies of that generation, a prescription from Dr. Gonzalez. Reconciliation. Only for the good.